Oh my, you, a daughter-in-law, aren't my family. My mother-in-law Susan declared in a restaurant on our vacation. I told you this is a family trip. Of course there's no seat for you here. Did you really think you were a part of this family? You have such a thick skin. Don't you consider yourself a part of us, you hag? You bring shame. You can't even be a servant. I was the one who organized this fall trip, while she was just blubbering about what she wanted. And I was below a servant? Whatever, I don't want to join you guys anyway. I stood up from my seat. I was very much looking forward to this trip, and never imagined it would turn out this way. But then my mother-in-law, who was supposed to enjoy the trip, ended up crying later on. She was about to get bitten by karma in a foreign country. My name is Kathy. I'm an ordinary working wife. My husband Mike and I dated in university, and it's been 5 years since we got married right after our graduation. We've been together for about 9 years, including our university years. When you are with someone for that long, you start seeing the faults of the other. It wasn't like we were going through a rough patch, but we definitely lost passion for each other. At the beginning of our relationship, Mike always tried to be courteous. After marriage, he considered chores as women's jobs. He repeated shower, dinner, and sleep on weekdays after returning from work, and he lounged around, playing games all day on weekends. I had a job as well, so I wanted him to be more helpful. We often had arguments over the subject at the beginning of our marriage. After a while, I had given up. I'd even come to believe that it was less efficient to have poor help. I suppose all the couples were more or less like us. The world may have been doing its best to promote gender equality, but if you looked at it on a family level, I doubted that such a thing was going to permeate for decades to come. Anyway, Mike's laziness was only a minor problem. There was a much bigger issue. Susan, my mother-in-law. She didn't live with us, but often called and visited us at home. If she meant to spend quality time with us, it would have been appreciated, but not even once she tried. She came for only one reason: to ask me to do some bothersome tasks for her. For example, government-related procedures, arranging trips that I wasn't going, and an invitation to a thorough cleaning day at her house. I had to clean her AC, bathroom, kitchen, and so on. I wasn't there to help, but was made to do everything by myself. In addition to this, I signed up for her phone, an internet provider, and issued a credit card in my name. Other than that, I was used as her driver and as a nurse to her late mother when it was needed. Fortunately, I wasn't bothered during my work hours, but she didn't hesitate to disturb my private time with some sort of requests. Mike once told me that she was from an affluent family. When she was small, her family business bloomed, and they lived on a large property. She had a nanny who took care of all her needs. And then the business faltered with a change of trends. After the downsizing of the business, her family lived an ordinary life. But she reputedly kept a selfish habit from childhood. It didn't really matter how she became to be herself. Mike should have stood on his feet and made her stop harassing me, but he had never shown a sign of it. Maybe it was my fault for letting her be, just to keep peace in the family. In any case, I was not a servant. It would have been better if I had received even a single word of gratitude, but I only got that in the beginning. She's gotten used to ordering me around with a snap of the fingers, and even complained if something didn't go the way she wanted. It got nothing to do with me if she didn't like the weather on her trip I organized. She also had a stingy side, and never initiated to pay her credit card and phone bills unless I asked her. I didn't see her every day, so when I was busy with my life, I sometimes put off urging her, and then eventually forgot about it. I couldn't tell you how much money I had sponsored her. I used to twist my brain to find a way to make her stop asking me without upsetting her. Despite my feelings, Susan, as usual, asked me for a favor one day. "Hi, Kathy. I want to go on a family trip overseas. Please organize it." As soon as I answered the phone, she started with her request. She gave me the detail as follows. The destination was Barcelona. The length of the trip was 1 week, and the number of packs was 5. Flights must be booked in business class, and a specific restaurant must be reserved. Other than that, she said, everything else was left to my ability. How self-serving. I didn't even know if I was able to take a week off from my work. Even if I did, what about Mike? You know, it's a bit last minute. I don't know if Mike and I can get days off from work. To which she replied with totally unexpected comments. Why should you get approval for a family trip from your company? Mike's okay with it anyway. You should prioritize your family over your job in the first place. I pity your sensibility. She hung up on me. What an imposition. It was the biggest hassle ever. If I didn't follow through on the plan, I shuddered to think how she would treat me in the future. So far, her bullying had been done insidiously in the form of requests, but I wondered if it was to become more blatant. I had no choice but to make travel arrangements, no matter how much I was annoyed. And for once, it wasn't all bad. I was actually looking forward to Barcelona too. It was the first time for me to go abroad on vacation. How could I not be excited? I then asked my boss if I could take some time off. Although he was reluctant, he gave me an okay because it was an off-peak season. I surveyed tourist attractions meticulously and reserved our flights, hotel, and the restaurant Susan wanted to go to. I was confident that she would not complain. And then the day of our trip arrived. There was Susan, her husband John, his sister Anne, Mike, and me, the 5 of us. I've spoken to Anne a bit before, but in terms of relationship value, it's almost as if we've never met before. Nevertheless, I was made to carry Susan and Anne's luggage under Susan's direction, and I struggled to keep up with the group. It was too difficult to carry a week worth of luggage for 3 people, including my own. My hands were full, and I couldn't even wipe the sweat from my forehead due to the hard labor. I couldn't resist calling out to Mike. "Hey, help me out here. Take your mom or Aunt's luggage." He gave me a displeased expression, but held out his hands to me. Just when I was about to pass one of the luggage to him, Susan called out to Mike from ahead of us. "Mike, don't you take that. This is a family trip, which means we don't have to do any work." You don't need to help her. You should give ears to her instead. It sounded like I wasn't a family member. I glanced at John and Anne, who quickly looked away. They probably felt bad for me, but didn't want to intervene and upset Susan. As for Mike, he happily asked, "Really? You take my suitcase? Do I look like I'm capable?" I raised my voice, which attracted the eyes of strangers around us. Susan remarked, "How embarrassing," and laughed. Feeling ashamed, I kept my face down and carried the luggage. In a short while, I was freed from being a porter after the check-in. Our seat class was business as Susan wished. It was 1-to-1 seat configuration, and the individual seats looked quite roomy. Then I suddenly became concerned about the cost of the trip, hoping they were going to pay for their parts. It was too late to worry about it at the point, so I discarded the thought. The sitting order was Susan and Anne, Mike and John, and myself with a stranger, using the 2 rows in the center. It was inevitable for an odd number of people, but there was no consultation. As a matter of course, I was alone. Although I was at ease on the plane without having Susan ask me to do something. Mike fell asleep as soon as he sat down and did not seem to care about me. So I had a lonely 10 hours flight to Barcelona with hardly anyone to talk to. And then we safely arrived at El Prat Airport. When I got off the plane, my mood was lifted by the unfamiliar scent of the air in a foreign place, and I forgot all about my lonely flight. Such excitement was short-lived as we picked up our luggage, and once again, I had to carry the ones for Susan and Anne. I kept calm and endured in silence. It was better than fighting on our first day and having the worst trip ever. With such a thought on my mind, we arrived at the restaurant Susan requested. I couldn't figure out why we didn't leave our luggage at the hotel first and then headed out. By all accounts, it was easier that way. Anyway, I entered the restaurant happily, thinking I would be released from the porter job for a while. Then I saw Susan waving her hand to someone. I followed her gaze and saw a man about the same age as her waving back. I had no idea who he was and wondered if he was a local. He was sitting at the table I had reserved. Why was a stranger sitting there? Unaware of my confusion, Susan walked toward him. "How have you been, Tom? It's been a long time." Tom? I had heard the name before. I went up to him and introduced myself. "I'm Kathy, wife of Mike. Nice meeting you." When we exchanged a kiss on the cheeks, he looked a little puzzled, then turned a friendly smile on his face and said, "I'm Tom, brother of Susan. I've been living here for a long time, so we've never met before. I might have made you feel uncomfortable by showing up suddenly, but we're a family now, so don't be shy." It seemed like he was a kind person, unlike Susan. That said, there was one problem. If Tom was joining us, the number of reservations should have been changed. Susan was so careless as to not let me know ahead of time. "Susan, if you knew Tom was joining us, you should have told me in advance. I don't think there's a problem to add one more seat here, but I don't know about the other places." She looked puzzled for a moment. "Why do you need to change the number?" she innocently asked. I didn't think I said something strange. I worried that she was showing a symptom of dementia because there are you, John, Tom, and Mike and me, the 6 of us. Before I could say anything else, Susan made a face that said, "Got it." You see, we don't need to change them. We got enough seats. I told you this is a family trip. Of course there's no seat for you here. Did you really think you were a part of this family? You have such thick skin. Don't you consider yourself part of us, you hag? You bring us shame. You're just a guide. You can't even be a servant. What? Did she just say I wasn't her family? I had done everything she asked me to do. Even though this trip was arranged all by me, I was still seen as less than a servant. Moreover, Mike seemed to not care, even though his wife was degraded in public. Hey Mike, can you back me up? We are married, but are we not a family? He frowned as if to say he didn't want to be involved in this. Of course, you and I are our family, but the relationship between you and my mom isn't really so. And I'm told that you're just a guide on this trip. I thought you knew and came along. Are you joking me? He was stunned by an enraged shout, and then mumbled, "Don't get me involved." Other diners around us stared at me, just as the passengers in the airport did. But I wasn't ashamed this time. I was more hurt to be mistreated to this extent. Susan opened her mouth, not bothered that I was struggling to hold my tears back. Now that you know, get to your duty. Your job is to find a taxi and take all our luggage to the hotel. And then come get us around the time we finish our meal. You can do whatever you like in between. She acted indifferently as usual and told me as if it were right and natural to do so. I was beyond outraged. I glared at Susan, who treated me like a slave, and Mike, John, and Anne, who couldn't think for themselves and neither agreed nor denied it. I'm leaving. I don't care about you guys. You have Tom who lives here, so you can manage without me. I decided to walk away from them at this point. Then Susan yelled at my back. Wait a minute. What about our luggage? At least take them to the hotel. Why do you think I let you come along? I ignored her and grabbed a taxi to the airport. I booked a return flight on the way there. While I was waiting for my flight, I kept crying from the devastation and despair that Mike of people didn't see me as a family member. I might have made other passengers around me uneasy, but my heart was so torn to shreds that I couldn't care less. Then my phone started ringing. I wasn't in no mood to talk to anyone, so I didn't check who was calling. But the phone didn't stop ringing for a long time. When I finally picked up, it was Mike. I thought maybe he wanted to apologize. No, it couldn't have been. Hey hon, can you come back ASAP? Tom got upset with my mom and left, and we got kicked out of the restaurant. We don't know what to do now. Family is supposed to help each other, right? So please. Apparently, Tom was a decent man as I expected him to be. I asked him to elaborate. Tom didn't like Susan and Mike's attitude toward me. I'm disgusted. I don't want to spend any more time with you people. He yelled at them and left the restaurant. In addition, the waiter kicked them out for being a nuisance and creating a scene. And they were at a loss for what to do next. Now, how did we ever get from the airport to the restaurant? That was because I interacted with locals in Spanish. I had never taken a vacation overseas, but I often had business trips to Spanish-speaking countries. Therefore, I learned conversational level through study and experience. When things went rough, they wanted me as a family member. My sorrow and despair evaporated in thin air. Karma caught up with them. I reluctantly decided to tell him the location of the hotel, in Spanish. The name of the hotel is ABC, located about 20 minutes from the restaurant by taxi. What? What are you saying? I don't understand. Speak English. I'm telling you nicely. It's your fault that you guys didn't do any prep work in the first place, you know. You guys said I wasn't a family member. So I don't care what happens to you. You're not my family anyway. While I was speaking, Mike hysterically screamed nonsense at me. Then Susan took over the phone. Kathy, Mike is trying hard, but why are you not helping him? A wife is supposed to be devoted to her husband. Come back. Fulfill your duty, you useless hag. She was out of her head. Even though we spoke the same language, the conversation was not going to happen. I knew it well, and it was time for my boarding, so I wasn't gonna waste any time on her. Get lost, I said in Spanish, and hung up on her. Then I immediately started the process to cut off her cell phone and credit card. A sequel to the story. Susan and company had wandered around in the city of Barcelona until they met a kind English speaker who helped them with scheduling the flight. But during that time, they were troubled by vicious rip-offs and pickpocketing. Because of that, the cash they had brought with them was almost gone. I was so glad I had cancelled Susan's credit card. I left my wedding ring and the contact detail of my divorce lawyer in the house I lived with Mike. I searched for a seasoned divorce lawyer as soon as I returned. I was determined to fight with Mike, but he easily agreed to the term. He not only lost a lot of money during the trip, but he had resigned from work, so he had no financial means to hire a lawyer for himself. When Susan approached him about the trip, "You can find a job once you're back. Even if you can't have Kathy, you can be a stay-at-home husband. A family trip is more important." He had been talked into it. Unbelievably moronic, right? Anyway, I quickly became a free woman thanks to this. Mike lost most of his assets due to alimony and property division, and he's now working like a horse. Susan heavily relied on me for various procedures, so she has no clue what to do with them now. She fell behind or failed to pay credit cards and taxes, and her life is starting to fall apart. They should sink to the bottom at once.
My name is Annie, 47 years old. Since I got married, I had been taking care of my husband, who had never done chores as a housewife. I met John, who was turning 50 this year, at the hospital I worked. It was a common story, our nurse-patient relationship. When his discharge was announced, he asked me out. He was good-looking and well-spoken and knew how to treat a woman. I was still naive back then and immediately fell for him. We had smooth sailing into the marriage afterward. Unfortunately, we weren't blessed with children, and our conversation diminished later in the marriage. But we still went out for special dinners to celebrate birthdays and anniversary. We weren't lovey-dovey, but an ordinarily middle-aged couple. Again? I sighed disapprovingly in the kitchen. John had been coming home late these few months. He often went to work on weekends too, so our barely existing couple time was becoming non-existent. I stared at an empty notification on my phone. He looked tech-savvy, but he was actually lagged behind and used a senior phone, which of course had messaging apps, email, and call functions. He didn't even have a Nokia before, but he willingly decided to get a smartphone, saying it must have been inconvenient for me. He wanted to master the phone, so he was training himself even in the bathroom for the first 6 months. Considering that it was a waste of the phone if he didn't use it for the purpose. Not hearing from him didn't mean I could go ahead and finish my dinner. He would have no doubt said, "Where's my dinner?" On the other hand, if I prepared food, I already had dinner. It was a dilemma. I didn't mean to complain to a husband who came home exhausted from work. It was just a bit sad to have the leftover for my lunch the next day when I cooked it for him with love and care. One day, I got into our car to go shopping. It was normally used as John's private property, which he took to work on weekdays and sometimes on weekends, so I rarely had a chance to drive it. He was unusually at home that day. While he was still sleeping, I planned to drive a supermarket that was having a big sale far out of town. I switched on the navigation and was stunned to see the list of histories. What the heck? Cafe Kitty and Sunrise Aquarium? Wait a minute, I've never been to those places. Moreover, it had been a month since I was in the car last time. I felt the cold sweat running down on my spine. When I found many other histories that didn't sound work-related, I breathed in deep to calm myself down. I took a picture of the screen with my trembling hands. It was 8 a.m. John had come back wasted from a business entertainment at around 1 a.m. He was still in his deep slumber, snoring away. It was the only chance. I liked watching crime dramas, and my favorite characters were crime scene investigators. I pretended to be one and bent over to check under the seats and trash meticulously. I found a long string of curly brown hair and a tiny gold earring in a crack in the seat. Yes, secured, not my hair. I kept my hair short, which was easier to take care of, and John and I didn't have our ears pierced. I felt too anxious to drive, so I canceled shopping. Once I returned inside the house, I started cooking like nothing ever happened. It had been 20 years since I became a housewife. I normally prepared 2 types of breakfast, ironed John's shirts and handkerchief, polished his leather shoes every night, and cooked a healthy dinner and etc. I had mastered everything he wished me to do, yet he betrayed me. I was humiliated and didn't want to believe it. A short while later, John got up. Morning. Which one would you like, a smoothie bowl or eggs and bacon? I had too much to drink last night, so I will have a smoothie bowl. I left a newspaper on a dining table. I served breakfast in front of him, who was reading the papers with a TV noise in the background. I go through the trouble of preparing 2 different meals. What a nice wife I was. It was a usual breakfast scene. I sat down across from him, pretending to be calm. Can I borrow the car today? I want to go to a supermarket out of town for the big sale. Are you sure? You haven't driven for a long time. I will be fine. I will use the navigation. I don't trust you. I will go instead. I smiled at him, who spoke cautiously as if he was choosing the right words. Let's go together then. Okay. I will clean the car after I finish here. You get ready. He folded the papers haphazardly and gulped his breakfast in a rush. He was still wearing his nightrobe when I saw him run out of the house. I waited for the front door to close, and then I put the hair and the piercing in a Ziploc bag with the date and time and hid in the back of the cupboard. I went out with John for the first time in months that day. The car was vacuumed, and there wasn't a single speck of dust inside. When I started the navigation, the history had been deleted. I thought to myself that I would let it go this time for not having enough evidence, but there wasn't going to be a second time. I glared at John, who was strangely nice to me in my mind. Things were peaceful for the next few weeks until my birthday. It was when the unexpected happened. John was going to get off of work early, and we were supposed to have dinner together. I booked the French in the mall at 8:30 tonight. Don't be late, I reminded him while preparing breakfast, but he gave me a half-hearted groan. Maybe he didn't get enough sleep from coming home late again last night. Since the shopping day, he must have reflected on himself because he started letting me know when he was going to be late. Thanks to that, I stopped having a dilemma about his dinner, but the lateness remained the same. It made me concerned about his health from overwork. I dressed up for the occasion and went out to the restaurant at night. It was located about 15 minutes by taxi, and it was at the quiet corner on the upper floor of the mall. I was seated in the back by the large window looking out to the parking lot. I texted John and then ordered an aperitif. He didn't reply to my text. After 30 minutes of waiting, I finally called him. When he answered after ringing for a while, he sounded bothered.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, where are you? I texted that I was waiting for you at the restaurant.
Oh yeah, my bad. I'm slammed at work and can't make it.
What? What do you mean? You always got off on time for special occasions. You could have let me know earlier if you couldn't make it. He clicked his tongue as if to say celebrating his wife's birthday was a nuisance.
I didn't even have time to do that. I'm working. Unlike you, who is at home doing whatever you like. Anyway, I can't leave tonight. Cancel the dinner. Got it? Bye.
Wait a minute. When I was about to hold him back, he had already hung up on me. It wasn't any day but my birthday. As I gave in, I called my waiter to explain the mishap and told him that I would pay for the pre-booked course. He kindly suggested having dinner alone and just paying for myself. As I contemplated, my phone pinged with a text from John. Did you cancel? I was upset with a one-line text without an apology. I sent back a bitter reply. Yeah, just your part. Then I turned to the waiter. I will take up on your suggestion, please. Even if I went back home now, there was nothing to eat. Since it was a hump day, the restaurant was only half full. I decided to enjoy my birthday French dinner alone in quiet. I even planned to post my complaints and pictures on social media then. I had been just looking through it almost every day, but that's how it was supposed to be used. John had no interest or knowledge in social media, and it was frustrating sometimes, but I was glad then he was not good at IT in general. I enjoy a beautiful course, tasting every bite and swallowing down with my frustration. I stared out of the window with tipsy eyes, just looking at the cars in the parking. Then I saw a familiar one among them, John's car. A stranger walked toward it. I was totally stunned by what my eyes saw in the next few seconds. An elegantly dressed young woman with an unmatched supermarket echo bag and long curly hair got in the car so naturally. The alcohol in me evaporated in a second. I scurried to record on my phone, but it was too late. The car drove away in the opposite direction from our home. There was a strip of bars and an old bowling alley in that direction, and also a motel. My anger started to simmer. It was a moment that turned what had been vague to clear. My phone got a ping. John wrote, "I will be back in 2 hours. No need for dinner." It was a familiar message, but since I caught the scene, it just angered me even more. I should have made him sorry the other day. It was my fault for giving him a benefit of doubt. I quickly paid my bill and got in a taxi to home. I tried to call John several times, but he never picked up. I texted him to come home soon, and as soon as I got back in the house, I threw my phone on the sofa. I waited for a while for him. Then he finally showed up carrying his usual demeanor and passed me a supermarket echo bag.
Hey, sorry to miss the dinner. This is for you.
Inside a big bag, there was a piece of cake with a discounted price tag. If it was a normal time, I could have laughed, but I was fuming instead. What were you doing?
I was working.
What kind of work is picking up a young girl and driving away?
What?
I threw back the bag with the cake at him. I went to grab the Ziploc from the cupboard and then shove it into him. "I found these in your car. You are cheating on me. I want a divorce." He was flustered, and I was determined to get the truth. But I was astounded by what he had said next.
What are you talking about? Where is your proof?
What? Here, this is.
And?
He shouted at me so loud. I flinched, to which he grinned as if to say he won.
I guess these were from the colleague I gave a ride to once. What I'm asking is if you have evidence that I'm having an affair.
I saw unusual histories on your car navigation. I took a picture of it. And I saw you tonight. I only canceled your part and had my dinner there. I saw from the window your car picking up a woman in the parking. He deliberately let out a long sigh.
What you saw on the navigation is from when I was looking for a place to take you. And our car you saw wasn't mine tonight.
Yes, it was.
Show me your proof. If you insist, you must have a picture.
No. The moment I hesitated, he punched a wall.
You get hysterical and accuse me of cheating when I'm so tired from work. And even disregard me for doing the least I can do. How can you be like that without concrete evidence? You should be ashamed of yourself.
His outburst left me speechless. Seeing me stunned, he sat back on the sofa as if he was done with it.
I'm not giving you a divorce. I want to take a bath. Get to it now. You better not forget to polish my shoes too.
Fine. I knew it was pointless to argue with him. As soon as I turned my back to him, I heard his chuckles. The 20 years we got built together were falling apart. At the same time, my feelings toward John were freezing. I could only feel my anger and frustration. I carried out the tasks he had demanded in silence, and then, when he had fallen asleep, I packed basic things, took a spare key to the car, and left the house. It was dawn when I got to my parents' house. I explained my situation to them, who welcomed me back without a question. A few hours after I arrived, John called me.
You, where are you? You're the worst wife, just taking off like that.
It wouldn't have happened if you weren't having an affair.
Drop it. I'm not divorcing you. Come back now. You are supposed to take care of me for the rest of your life.
Something in me exploded. I was just a useful servant to him. His servant called the affair, but she wasn't supposed to meddle with it. If he didn't want to come out clean, then I had a plan. I was going to make him regret not owning up to his responsibility. Okay, I will get a lawyer. You will hear from him soon. I hung up before he could say anything. I wasn't gonna let him get away with it easily at this point. It made no sense to not demand alimony for adultery. I squeezed my phone tightly and called an office of a private detective. The day of the arbitration arrived a few weeks later. Of course, I had prepared well with my lawyer for this. John, on the other hand, was going to present himself. It was a great turn of the event for me. He must have thought that he could easily pressure me to submit to him like the other day, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I knew how well-spoken he was than anyone else. The arbitrator wasn't supposed to be influenced, but who knew if John wasn't going to try? I gladly accepted to face him. He showed up looking quite disheveled at the meeting. His shirt and pants were wrinkled and shoes were unpolished. It seems his mistress wasn't good at chores as I expected. The second he noticed me, he called out my name desperately and blubbered his love to me. Living alone must have gotten to his head. It was such a performance of his life. The arbitrator was astounded and watched him for a little while. When I knocked her with a cough, she finally silenced John. She asked me to present first, but it was John who opened his mouth. I quietly stopped her, who tried to quiet him. He declared his love and his faithfulness to me. He never cheated, was in love with me, and we always celebrated our anniversary over a special dinner. John's tearful plea was mixed with fact, which made it sound somehow realistic. I was quite annoyed. When the arbitrator finished with John, she turned to me. "Now, can you please present your case?" There was untruth in John's claim, his adultery. I had done the best I could to take care of him. His adultery is a betrayal. I asked for a divorce, that's all.
I told you I never cheated on you. You better prove it.
He really wanted to see the evidence. I was ready to give them to him. Firstly, please take a look at this. This is a picture of the car navigation histories that gave me suspicion in the first place. It's a print out of the picture. I also found a string of hair and piercing in the car on the same day, and John smirked at the evidence as the arbitrator wasn't looking at him. I opened my PC and faced the screen toward the arbitrator and John. This is a social media account of John's mistress.
Huh?
It seems like he has hidden his marital status from her, so she has been posting every outing with him. John's smirk disappeared. The arbitrator stretched her arms toward my PC. May I? Sure, please. The arbitrator scrolled the page as she inspected the posts. It was just a lucky guess. I realized that most of the car navigation histories was a photogenic spot. I thought there might be pictures of John and his mistress in the background and searched social media with a little hope. I didn't have a gut to contact a private detective at that point. I was just looking for any proof. As I expected, there was a large amount of data, and I finally found an account after consuming a lot of spare time I had as a housewife. There was a post with a comment. I went for a drive with my mature boyfriend. I'm sad to lose my piercing though. Let me know if someone finds it. She considerably uploaded a picture of the same piercing I had found in the car. The owner of the account had the same style of hair and the same coat she wore when I first saw her. There were other contents that fit perfectly with the histories of car navigation, and some images with a figure of John without the face. I was certain it was his mistress. Too bad I already had hired a detective at this point. Well, the moment I found this, I immediately informed him. The arbitrator looked at John coldly.
This is not an affair. It's strictly a business relationship on my side. She's the one misunderstood the fact. I ignored his excuses and produced more evidence. Dozens of pictures that came from my detective were laid out on the table. John didn't need to excuse himself anymore after I left, so he seemed to take the opportunity to spread his wings. I heard it was so easy to take pictures of them, such as going into a motel room, visiting his mistress at her house, and taking her into our home. Most of all, there was one picture that caught my eye. I mumbled, "Wolf," and showed the image. A 50-year-old middle-aged man with a collar and leash
was ecstatically worked by a young woman in a park. The arbitrator clearly showed her disgust. Every time John rushed to grab the nighttime walk photo, I retrieved another one taken from various angles. I looked into his eyes and said,
Woof, woof. Stop it! They're not for your entertainment.
"So should I send these to your office?"
No! Wait!
And now, here's another one. If I may comment, you shouldn't use the car as a motel room. I showed the result of a lab test. I gave the spare key to my detective and had him swap the seats in the car. As expected, there were bodily fluids that validated his adultery. Or do you guys like to drive around without your underwear? Either way, it would be wise not to. I smiled at John, who was red-faced and trembling. "Did you enjoy the evidence?" Shell-shocked, he muttered some swear words and hung his head in despair. A poor puppy. From then on, the arbitration proceeded in a decent manner. In addition to the division of property, it was decided that I was also to receive a hefty alimony payment for his betrayal in a long-standing marriage. I expected that. After everything was decided, John blurted out something.
I will let you have a divorce. Even after paying you all that, I still got a house. I will marry my young and pretty girlfriend. We'll live a modest life, and she would slowly but surely learn to take care of the house.
What are you talking about? She's leaving you.
Huh?
When she posted about the relationship on the social media, it's obvious that she is dating you without knowing you're married. I mean, who would make such brazen posts knowing her boyfriend is married? Her contact information was easily obtained on social media. I reached out to her through the detective before arbitration. She was told by John that he had a girlfriend he wanted to leave and had no idea he was married. He just wanted to show off to the public. My mature boyfriend is hot and confirm her status in society. Well, if she knew the truth, she wouldn't have posted on social media. But that didn't change the fact that she tried to steal a guy from another woman. She said she was going to spread the fact on her social media, and also, she wasn't going to see you again.
No way.
The arbitrator then said, "We are done here." I shook hands with her and walked out of the room, leaving a pale-faced John. I heard about John and his mistress from my private detective later on. Instead of getting sympathy from her followers, she was bashed about her adultery when the truth came out. People close to her also found out, and it became too uncomfortable to stay at work anymore. No one knew where she moved to, but her previous apartment suddenly became empty. John couldn't come up with a sum for alimony and spousal support after all, so he sold the house and moved to a small apartment. As a result of never helping with housework, his life was disheveled, his appearance became filthy, and the smell of garbage leaked out of his apartment. As a result, his colleagues stayed away from him, and his bosses were disgusted that he was demoted and moved to a dark corner of the office. From what I had heard, it sounded like he'd be working even after his retirement. As for me, I managed to find a job in a small hospital near my parents' house. Having 20 years of blank on the job is huge. Although I struggle with the latest equipment, I'm blessed with kind colleagues, and I'm living a fulfilling life. The alimony was used to renovate my parents' house for their future. I'm supposed to inherit it anyway. Above all, my parents, who are getting older, will have a difficult time if it remains as is. It's an old single-story house, but my parents were overjoyed when the interior was redecorated and became cozier. The cost of the private investigation had reduced my savings, but I don't regret it. I can still work hard and make money again. I want to buy a car for the convenience of commuting and shopping when I save up enough money. Of course, if I have a boyfriend in the future, I won't use the car for anything other than its intended purpose.